There are perhaps fewer genres that are as generally appealing as the murder mystery, and when it comes to anime, one can find many examples of it within their favorites. Despite this, or perhaps exactly because of this subsequent oversaturation, there can be many series that fall through the cracks each season. For this video, I wanted to highlight 3 in particular that I think deserve a bit more attention than they perhaps got, especially given their content and status. These 3 range from the wildly mystical to the scientific, and finally, a mix of both. Releasing in the second half of 2023, Undead Girl Murder Farce may have gone under the radar for many due to its unwieldy title and the relatively unknown studio behind it. However, the content, production, and names behind it definitely outrank the attention granted to it. Based on a light novel series, this anime follows a Japanese trio composed of an immortal decapitated head, her servant, and her half-oni duelist detective sidekick, as they search for the rest of the immortal's stolen body. To accomplish and fund this task, they have become private investigators across Europe, and the series follows their journey from mystery to mystery and clue to clue. What immediately grabs the viewer's interest are the characters, both from our crew as well as the many they pass by in each successive arc. The dynamics between our trio can be said to carry the show in the first half, reminding one of Araragi and Kissha in Monogatari, also a light novel series turned into an anime. The immortal girl is keen and sympathetic to aberrations such as herself, he a theatrical devil boy who is nonetheless ever loyal, while Shizuku is unwittingly in the middle, trying to serve her master in spite of Sugoro's antics. Our first mystery acts as initiation into this world and how our main characters interact with and are seen by this late 19th century society. Eccentric and perhaps exotic even by the standards of non-humans, they are hired to investigate the murder of a lady vampire murdered in the mansion of her husband one fateful night. While the mystery itself is a closed room sort of deal that isn't especially notable on its own, the presentation provided in both production and from the dramatic tenor of our duo enlivens it all. The mystery is presented as a play, a theater routine, both by our main character as well as the direction itself. But will this play be a tragedy or a farce? This is the deciding theme of each mystery they come across. One case ends and they are led into another, bigger case, located none other than in London, finally granting us an insight into the machinations of the story as a new case unfolds. Other characters enter London and steadily turn the show into a battle royale of recognizable minds. Sherlock Holmes, Arsène Lupin, Aleister Crowley, and a couple other characters of fiction and non-fiction, literature and legend are given life in the arena of this supernatural world. They navigate among oni, werewolves, vampires, and other creatures in decline. It is exactly here through the second arc in the middle that a grand farce unveils, or in other words, the plot. These characters coalesce into numerous factions and are dropped into a sparring contest of mind and brawn that accelerates the pacing and becomes a delightful adventure to watch. The battle centers around a mysterious jewel stored deep in the vault of a rich patron who hires our main crew, alongside Sherlock and a monster-killing insurance agency. Arsène Lupin has, in his gentlemanly duty, sent a letter prescribing his intent to steal this jewel, named Penultimate Night, which slowly reveals itself to have more significance than its mere luster. In fact, as we soon discover over the course of this heist, it hits closer to home for both Aya and Sugoro's backgrounds than they both expect. The heist evolves into chaos, with each faction hired for its defense distrusting each other and pursuing different paths, operating on their own secret motives as it appears that people other than Lupin intend to get their hands on this jewel. What is also notable about this arc is that Chiaki J. Konaka enters production and writes the episode scripts for its entirety. Konaka likely needs no introduction, though it is curious that this seems to be the first anime he has worked on in any capacity since Technolize. Nonetheless, it certainly benefits from his penning, as despite many events happening at once, it still feels fluidly paced and lucid. The somewhat humorous conclusion of this farce leads into the final and longest arc of the story, which nestles it back into a murder mystery. Without spoiling anything, the trio are now led to a remote village teetering on mob violence amid a strange set of disappearances of young girls. The longest arc in the show, and certainly the most involved we get into a true small village murder mystery, where hidden motivations and ancient backgrounds unravel into a rather clandestine conclusion. Unfortunately, the anime does not end with a conclusion to the story as a whole. That certainly acts as a reason to read the rest of the novel series or its manga adaptation, but with how recent this anime is, perhaps the rest could be adapted into a second season. Probably not, but even with it being currently or maybe indefinitely unfinished, it's certainly worth a watch if not for the somewhat eclectic style alone. Pivoting to an altogether different murder mystery in style and setting, Everything Becomes F, The Perfect Insider is a more scientific take with a grounded setting in the modern day. It's the most popular anime on this list, perhaps mostly due to its opening. The author of the original novel, Hiroshi Mori, is known for this sort of writing, himself being a former research scientist and associate professor with a doctorate in engineering. He is responsible for the Skycrawler series of novels, which would go on to be adapted into animated film by none other than Mamoru Oshii. Shared between these two adaptations is a soundtrack by Kenji Kawai, another storied name with a perfect contribution to both anime. The show aptly follows an associate professor named Sohei Saikawa as he travels with a friendly university student to a remote facility housing the secluded Shiki Megata. This island-bound location has acted as a refuge for this hidden genius programmer, yet upon Saikawa's visit, a seemingly impossible murder happens. From the locked room that is supposed to protect her from the outside world, the corpse of Megata appears. What follows is an intricately crafted mystery explored through the nearly episode-long conversations between Saikawa and his junior Moe. These conversations gravitate from the mystery itself to more philosophical ideas in lieu of Megata's complex and the circumstances of her life and death. This is aided by her few close associates, alongside the details and musings such as those from her uncle, sister, and the few facility assistants. What you'll immediately come to notice about this show is that it's very dialogue heavy. Even the opening is titled Talking, and much of the anime consists of people debating each other through problems, whether of life, circumstance, or the grand mystery itself. For some people, this can be a turn-off, but for people who are quite invested in murder mysteries, this should be par for the course. Much of the show's thematic angles point towards life and freedom, at times seeming to be one and the same. After a while, it feels as if what's being solved isn't so much a murder, but alternating views of the desire for freedom. At the core of the mystery too is the part of the title that tends to be forgotten, the code of F in Everything Becomes F. The show exercises its psychological muscle from beginning to end, reaching a crescendo in its very last minutes with quite a memorable twist. It's hard to discuss much of this without delving too much into spoilers, as it relates strongly with the unusual and even uncomfortable backstory of Shiki, which is drip-fed to us across the show. We never actually get to see her side of the story until the very end, and the mystery often hinges on how characters choose to interpret her as a personality, or perhaps of multiple personalities. They do so based on the few events of her life as they are known to others. It is this exact conundrum that gives cause for Shiki to see herself as burdened by the world around her, and so she seeks freedom. Saikawa echoes this sentiment and romantic desire for freedom from the world, and chases after it in Megata and the mystery of her death. In the end though, his mind clouds him to the truth beyond his own, and the genius of the mystery unveils itself in the very last act. The last on my list, Mouryou no Hako, translated to Box of Goblins, happens to be my favorite of the bunch, yet also the hardest to recommend. The production itself is an old 2008 Madhouse anime, made during their peak years, with a director from many episodes of Monster and the Aoi Bungaku series. As a result, the show is drenched in this subdued and dreamlike atmosphere, with some pretty gruesome imagery and affecting visuals. Among these visuals is something very curious that Undead Murder Farce shares with it: a traveling man with a talking decapitated head hidden within a box. Perhaps it was influenced. The plot is hard to summarize in any concise manner, and the adaptation itself is of the second novel of a series of novels, adding to this bit of awkwardness. Despite this, the show flows together quite well, and the production for Madhouse even on this little known show is brilliant as always. Taking place in 1952 Japan, the mystery could be summed up as being about tracking down a serial killer who leaves the dismembered bodies of his female victims, limb by limb, carefully stuffed in boxes across different locations. But this is barely even scratching the surface of what the mystery entails. Mouryou, from the title, can mean many things, translatable to goblin or evil spirits, and in Chinese to Japanese mythology, takes on varying amount of roles from time to time or place to place. The changing mythology of the Mouryou, the significance of boxes, esoteric Japanese Shinto rituals and practices, and how all of these old traditional aspects of spiritualism are fit into and even manipulated into modern Japanese society is the true core of this show. Almost entire episodes are dedicated to studying this mythology alone, and for many, this may be boring or dull at this point, but by the end, it's worth it. The mystery comes across through all of these subjects neatly, as the mystery grows beyond a simple serial killer and into an entire conspiracy of a local cult, old traumatic war experiments, and the many intrigues of characters related to victims and the cult itself. And that's not to pass up on the characters. While the story isn't very character-centric, the psychological penetration of the writing and the muted, mature depiction of the relations lends much to their characterization. We see much of this through the eyes of one of the protagonists, Sakaguchi. Sakaguchi is a writer who finds himself tormented by his own dissatisfaction with his stories, itself the result of an internal problem that leads him into interest in the dismemberment case, a case which turns out to hit closer to home than he first realizes. His old war buddy, Kiba, a detective, incidentally ends tied up with the case thanks to a chance encounter with the youth Kaneko, whose incident seemingly has little to do with the central mystery. Seeking further consultation, Sakaguchi and later Kiba end up visiting the central character of the novel series, Kyogo Kuro, or Akihiko Chuzenji, a bookstore owner and part-time onimoji. Related too is a local clairvoyant friend of Akihiko, Reijiro, who uses his apparent powers for private detective work. Much like Undead Murder Farce, the old and the new combine in a delicate bungling, but unlike that show, the existence of the spiritual world is a subject of debate. Akihiko, despite being an onimoji and fiercely studying these occultic subjects, does not effectively believe in it himself, instead diagnosing issues of its nature to psychology. Yet, the symbolism and power of these occultic practices and symbols exert an undeniably powerful influence. And as seen in people such as Reijiro, one is never certain of the supernatural's existence or not, even despite the skepticism inherent to the local cult and their machinations. Even in the dullest moments, where one may be a little confused about what it has to do with anything, the subject matter of these esoteric rituals and beliefs from ancient Japan and China is quite interesting to me. Backed up for this are some splendid sequences of audio-visual storytelling to keep you engaged both during these long dialogue scenes and others with little to no dialogue at all. At times, I was often struck by how consistently good the show looked, despite it seeming to garner little traction. Even amongst random minor characters with maybe a minute or two of total screen time, We see people like Junichi Suwabe, later voice actor of Sukuna and Aizawa, and Shinichiro Miki instantly recognizable as Kaiki. Not to mention the main voice actors and actresses as well. If one is ready for a slow burn of an anime, then you will be rewarded, and I'd highly recommend giving this underrated Madhouse gem, as well as the other series on this list, a try. Thank you for watching.